motorcade moves into the downtown area. Death is 6 minutes away. In a warehouse, a sniper with a rifle poised waits.
This is the president was assassinated, and then the assassin got assassinated. It's like, how the hell do we not know what actually happened?
Organized crime helped silence the CIA pawn, Lee Harvey Oswald.
It was inadequate work on the part of the CIA and the FBI in terms of following up on Oswald.
I just remember my father saying, don't feel bad about these guys were rats. They double-crossed us. People in the mob hated Kennedys.
You actually went to the Dallas Book Depository and you tried to make the shot yourself, and you concluded it wasn't an impossible shot.
Nobody wants to believe that something of that magnitude could take place with one person. It has to be a bigger story. Regardless of what is in this next release of documentation, I don't know that it's going to end up satisfying a lot of people.
Well, amongst the blitz of executive orders unleashed by President Trump during his first week in power, one particular decree caught the eye of conspiracy theorists everywhere.
We have an executive order ordering the declassification of files relating to the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
That's a big one, huh? A lot of people are waiting for this for years, for decades. And everything will be revealed. Okay? Give that to RFK Jr.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Well, the official.
Okay, here we are. How's everyone doing? Who's in the comments? Nobody in the comments yet? Anybody here? Oh, we'll have to see. Who comes on board. I hope someone comes on board because I was hoping this would be a group discussion on what you all think about this. So this is that was my plan anyway. So if nobody's here, if nobody's watching, I guess I'll just have to wing it for tape. For the sake of the tape for later publication. So I wanted to talk about that. This is something that for all of my life really that has been out there. And for those of you who don't know, I talk a lot about my youth and all the things that happens and lately with the death of Jimmy Carter. Carrie, good old Michael's keeping you late. How rude. Okay. Tell him Joel's on air and he needs an audience. If you would. So, but anyways, I'll just vamp for a minute here and then I'll get everyone caught up to speed. So this was something that, again, for all my life, I was born in 1960. I was 3 years old when the assassination happened. So I have no memory of JFK. I do have very much a memory of RFK and MLK, Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. So those assassinations were very prominent. And the word assassination, as an 8-year-old boy, I did not know what it was. So, okay, Gary, tell him I'm the last one. He needs to keep waiting because we do this with Ben every Friday. Michael hogs the mic. Tell him he's hogging the mic again. So I did not know what the word assassination meant. And I didn't know who I knew who Robert Kennedy was, I think, because we had been talking, most of my friends, I remember we were talking about the election coming up and who was for Kennedy and who was for McCarthy and who was for, I guess it was Richard Nixon. But those two, Kennedy and McCarthy, were the main ones taking over for Lyndon Johnson, who was such a bad president that he couldn't even run again. Morning, AC. Are people back? Okay, good. So, but I wanted to get everyone's. Lucas is here. Oop. Morning, Lucas. Chris Bounds. Hey, Chris. I don't think I've seen you in a while. Okay, so we're talking Trump releasing the documents for the Kennedy. It's interesting. He said Kennedy, JFK, RFK, and MLK. So, and I just played a clip from Piers Morgan, and I don't know, I might want to play it again because there are three guys on this panel. Let's see if I can maybe bring this up here and see if I can get this back on and play it again just for you guys. Bring it back to the front there.
At 1:25, the motorcade moves into the downtown area. Death is 6 minutes away. In a warehouse, a sniper with a rifle poised waits.
This is the president was assassinated, and then the assassin got assassinated. It's like, how the hell do we not know what actually happened?
Organized crime helped silence the CIA pawn, Lee Harvey Oswald.
It was inadequate work on the part of the CIA and the FBI in terms of following up on Oswald.
I just remember my father saying, don't feel bad about these guys were rats. They double-crossed us. People in the mob hated Kennedys.
Okay, I will stop at that. I don't want to take too much time in there, but that then it went on to show the actual ceremony of Trump signing the executive order to release the remaining documents and telling them to give the pen he signed it with to RFK Jr. And then he says a lot of people have been waiting for this for decades. Okay. And it's interesting that on that panel, you saw those three guys with Piers Morgan. One guy was an author who's been writing about the JFK assassination for years and does not for a minute buy the Warren Commission report or any other anything of the, I guess you would call it the general opinion or the accepted narrative of the assassination. The guy in the middle was Michael Franzese, who is a Christian speaker. He's a former mob, I guess, capo, bigwig, and I think it was the Colombo family in New York, who became a Christian. And now I've heard him speak 3 times. He came to my church a couple years ago. So he's an ex-mobster. He talks all about the life, and he's a pretty big deal, pretty popular guy. And the third guy was a former CIA agent who seems to be more of the conventional thing of, nobody wants to accept that just one guy could have done that. That's the line that they always give. So, I just wondered what I was, like I said, I was going to open this up and have a kind of discussion, see what you guys thought. I'll just give you my general opinion of it, because like I said, it's been something that's been a part of my life. A lot of you were around then too. I was only 3 years old when John Kennedy was shot, 8 years old when Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King were shot. So I remember Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King. But being an 8-year-old boy, I did not really fully understand what it was all about. So Roger Stone said Trump didn't release all the files because it was very bad. That's something they go into on this, because Trump was, in his first term, he said he was going to release all the files because I think in 1992, Congress or somebody decided that for 25 years, none of the Kennedy files could be seen. And that was 2017 was 25 years after that. So Trump said, I'm going to release all those files. And he didn't. And in this, they talk about that. It was very bad. He said, whoa, I can't release this. But now I think he's of the mind, well, here 62 years later, what are we trying to hide? So, Chris, I was former, my mom was upset and crying. Okay. Yeah, I was 3. My mom said I just played by the TV set the whole day, oblivious. And I remember her thinking, Joel doesn't even know what, this little 3-year-old boy doesn't even know what's happening. And I remember she said, "Wait, what's his future going to be?" So yeah, lots of shock through the, is that what they called the government back then? The mob? Yeah, well, yeah, he meant the real mob. But so I, through going through school, I saw a lot of, back in the 70s, there were a lot of presentations on why this could not have been a lone gunman and conspiracy. I know that there was one of my favorite albums is Woody Allen's Nightclub Years. If you haven't heard it, try and find it. It's very hard to find, but it's just Woody Allen did stand up. And one of his jokes was, I was up all night working on a nonfiction version of the Warren Report. And everybody laughed. And I think this was around 1964, 65 when he was doing this album. So right from the start, nobody believed the Warren Commission. Oh, wait a minute. I met a Kennedy at a bus stop once, and he gave me a Celtic style ring and told me it was a Celtic blessing. And he goes, "Oh, wow. Okay." Kennedys are an interesting clan, aren't they? So when I was in school, we had a lot of this kind of thing. And I've always been very skeptical of the fact that it was just Oswald, and for a couple reasons. First reason was that, and the main reason I think is, if you look at the tapes after Oswald is arrested and he's brought before the reporters, for some reason he's brought before these reporters and they're shouting at him, "Lee, did you kill the president?" He's like, "I haven't even heard anything about it." He goes, "I didn't kill anybody." He goes, "Well, they tell me I was supposed to kill a police officer, but I didn't even, and the reason I think that's important is presidential assassins don't do that. John Wilkes Booth shot Lincoln and jumped on the stage and yelled "Sic Semper Tyrannis," right? He wanted everyone to know that he did that. And because that Lincoln was a tyrant. The guy who shot Prinkett, World War I, he stepped right out. He wasn't trying, and shot Duke Ferdinand, and that kicked off World War I. And he was right out in front. People that assassinate leaders, especially if they're idealistic and want to do it for a cause, they don't deny it, because they want people to know that they are the ones that did this, so for their cause. So, and Oswald was all fair play for Cuba, right? He was all communism. If he did this, he did it for communism, to advance communism in Cuba and around the world. Well, he wouldn't. Typically, they don't do that. You don't see people who assassinate world leaders saying, "I didn't do it." Especially when he says he's a patsy, that's just doesn't happen. So that was one reason. The other reason was, and Michael Franzese, the mobster, gets, as you saw in that clip, he said, "Hey, the mob hated Kennedy." And when he talks about his father was a very high up mobster in the 60s. And he was very close with all, Frank Colombo and all the other guys that were big wigs in the New York mob. And he said, they hated Kennedy's because Kennedy betrayed them. In the 1960 election, it's very well accepted that Illinois was flipped for Kennedy by the mob in Chicago, and that's what won the election. And by the way, nobody ever talks about this. I think that was the fact that there was dirty play in that election and it cost Nixon the election. Nixon didn't pursue that. He didn't press the issue for the good of the country. He goes, "Yeah, I think this election was stolen from me, but I'm not going to press it because I don't think that's good for the country," which was very noble of him. But I think that led 12 years later, to Watergate. And I think that was Nixon's motivation for bugging the Democratic headquarters and saying, I want to make sure nothing's going on there because they stole this from me. They're not going to do it again. And nobody ever talks about that. But that's an aside. That's just my theory. But he said, Michael Franzese in this interview said, my dad said they hate him. And he said, when they release these documents, if they deny that Jack Ruby was in the mob and working for the mob, he goes, you'll know the whole thing's just BS. It's a smokescreen, because Jack Ruby was without a doubt a mob guy. He was one of Al Capone's men, and he'd been in the Chicago mob. He had police connections. He was able to get in that in the police parking garage there, getting past cops because he knew the cops, and I don't think they would have suspected him of having a gun. But so, and for him to silence Oswald, there was no reason to silence Oswald. There's no reason to shoot him. The fact that he was, I think I saw, they did something when I was a kid on Jack Ruby, some TV movie, and they just showed him being, all upset. They killed my president. And he went crazy. And then mob guys don't do that. And especially the mob at that time, everybody hated Kennedy. Jack Ruby had no sympathy for Kennedy. I find that very hard to believe. So the fact that he went in and shot Oswald tells me there was much more to this than just a lone nut who happened to get off a good shot. Years ago, I was in Dallas, and Siri sent me to the wrong hotel. I think the wrong Comfort Inn. It wasn't the Comfort Inn downtown. It was the Comfort Inn Love Field or something. And so I was at this thing, and he goes, you're at the wrong one. I said, well, how do I get to the right one? Well, he said, go down there, take a right on Houston Street, and then a left on Elm Street, and then go straight, which I didn't even think about. So I did it. So I went down, I took a right on Houston Street, and started going up this hill, and right in front of me was the Texas School Book Depository. I went, I know that building. And then I took a left on Elm Street. I'm like, I'm in the motorcade right now. I went right through Dealey Plaza. And so I went back, I think the next day, to do my own investigation of the thing. And it's funny, they have on Elm Street, they have an X marked where Kennedy was shot, and everybody runs out there and get their picture taken or whatever. It's kind of crass, actually. But looking at it though, from that building, I just don't buy it. He had a much better shot coming up Houston Street. If Oswald was in the window, they say he was, coming up Houston Street, he would have had a square on shot. So if he was up there, the only reason he waited is because for him to go down Elm Street and shoot him from behind is because he knew he had other triangulated fire or something. So my unofficial investigation tells me I don't think that happened that way. I think these files should, maybe the CIA agent is right. They won't, so much has been redacted probably. I don't know if they can reinstate what's been redacted. It may not satisfy anybody, but here 60 years, some years on, nobody's buying that it was just Lee Harvey Oswald. Okay, well, here's something we can AC. I did see a headline, Alex Jones and Roger Stone did a deep dive, and they say Johnson gave the order. Well, no, there's something there too, because I did see something where Jack Ruby was talking about this. He said, if you want to know who did this, you got to look higher up. And who's the guy that benefited most from this? Who's the guy that became president? Yeah. If Ruby was mob, he had every reason to shoot Oswald. Really, Kerry, why is that? I'd be interested to know why he would shoot Oswald if he was in the mob, since they hated Kennedy. And he was scared. What was Ruby scared of? That'd be interesting. I'd be interested to know your thoughts on that. I hadn't considered that. So, but there is footage of Jack Ruby saying this goes higher up than just me. And he's intimated and insinuated, look at Lyndon Johnson, because Lyndon Johnson was the guy who benefited most from this. I know a lot of people talk about the how right-wing Dallas was back then. The political climate was so, and it was ominous, and, they're afraid something like this was going to happen, inferring that somehow people with right-wing leanings did this, which doesn't make any sense at all, because who was the person that most benefited? The most left-wing president we may have ever had, Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson wasted no time in implementing the Great Society when he became president. And aside from the New Deal 30-something years before, there hasn't been nothing more damaging to our society than Lyndon Johnson's presidency with the Great Society. Yeah, no, I don't know if it's 100%. 100% of the country stands with your belief. That's not how it happened, but it's growing. So, what do you say, Lucas? Look at what LBJ was smiling. Yeah, no, he might have been trying to suppress a smile. Yeah, that's the kind of guy Lyndon Johnson was. Lyndon Johnson was a nasty human being. He was not a nice guy. I've seen and read things about people on his security, his Secret Service detail, people that work for him, and he was a bad guy, and he did bad things to this country. Yeah, trying to peg an innocent man, in my opinion, the less talk from Oswald, the better. Okay. So now I'm not 100% sure that Oswald wasn't part of it, but I'm 100% sure that he did not act alone. There would have been no reason. There'd been no reason for anybody to run in there and kill him. They got the guy. They're going to try him. Obviously, the only reason to go in and shoot him was to silence him. So that to me is the damning thing here. But we'll see. And like I said, Michael Francis says, when these documents come out, if they say that Jack Ruby was just a guy, a strip club owner in Dallas who was so upset and somewhat, triggered by Kennedy's assassination and somehow got past all the police and security, walked by 100 cops and shot Oswald, then you'll know it's not true. You'll know it's all BS. So we'll see. Now the RFK and the MLK, I know that there's been a lot of talk that Sirhan Sirhan was also a patsy. He claims he doesn't know. He didn't remember what was happening that whole time. A lot of people thinking it was with the MK Ultra. That I don't know. I have not really looked into much on RFK. And MLK, actually the CIA agent in this Piers Morgan show that I showed you a clip of before said MLK is the one that they really need to look at. He said that's the one that doesn't add up to him. And he's a former CIA agent. So it'll be interesting to see that. James Earl Ray is the guy that they pegged for it. He admitted it at first, if I remember. Okay, here we got a little sub conversation here going. Imagine had they actually shot Trump. Yeah. Talk about the anger in this country. And yeah. Yeah. I was in Chicago actually when that happened last summer. And when I saw Trump assassinated, my heart just sank. Or Trump shot, I should say. Trump shot. My heart just sank. It was a feeling. And then when I saw the video and saw that it just winged him in the ear, that was relief like I haven't felt in a long time. So, but again, it's funny. Some of you were alive at the same time that I was. Who was the one that, yeah, Chris, you were 4. Okay. So I was 3. There's been something that I heard about kids of our age. We grew up thinking that assassinations are normal. And I did. I grew up thinking this is what happens. And when you're a young kid, you always wonder if your dad someday could be president or something. And I said, I want my dad to be president. He'd be shot, because that's what they do with presidents. I mean, Lincoln and then Kennedy and, Bobby Kennedy, world leaders or U.S. leaders get shot. That's what happens to them. So we grew up thinking that was normal. And I still, to this day, it's in my mind, every president could possibly be shot, because I was imprinted with that. Yeah, Carrie, you agree? So, but, until Reagan was shot in 1980 or 1981, I guess, his first year as president, it hadn't happened. I know that Gerald Ford, a couple times, one of Charles Manson's crazy followers, Squeaky Fromm, tried to shoot him, and then this other lady, I think Sarah Jane Moore, I think it was, who no one could figure out why in the world she would, other than she was an old hippie radical, I guess. But so it's always been a part of life in the world, really. Go all the way back to Julius Caesar or Emperor Franz Ferdinand, or these things happen a lot because we're in a fallen world. And I did have try to get a Christian perspective on things. There is this thought from Luke. Luke 12:2. Okay. There's nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, nothing hidden that will not be made known. What you said in the dark will be heard in the daylight. What you have whispered in the ear of the inner rooms will be proclaimed from the roofs. Now, did I not? Oh, I didn't add it to the stage. I'm sorry. This is me with these things. Okay. So let's go back and read that again. There's nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. What you said in the dark will be heard in the daylight, and what you have whispered in the ear in any rooms will be proclaimed from the roofs. Now, I don't think Jesus was talking necessarily about these kinds of things. He was more talking to the Pharisees and what their inner motivations were and what they're putting on the people and their hypocrisy. But it does, truth in the end will win out. There's a big battle in the Christian communities these days and it's a phony battle. It's set up by people who we shouldn't be listening to, but between truth and love. Somehow truth and love, we have to choose between those. We can't tell the truth. If we tell the truth and stick to the truth of the Word of God, somehow we're not loving. And if we're loving, I guess we'll shade the truth. But truth will prevail, Carrie, and will be known. Okay. And I like what Trump's doing, because what are we afraid of? We need to know what happened. Everybody except the doctors I've heard a lot from the doctors in the emergency room. Some of them are still alive. All of them might have passed too. So nobody is around still. All the forces, even the mob is only a shell of its former self. The Cold War, which probably had a lot to do with it, the CIA, that would be the only thing I could think of, is some of these government agencies. If there's still that kind of rot in there, it needs to be known that it's in there and needs to be cleaned out. But the truth will prevail. That's why I like what Trump is doing. Thanks for coming late and hanging out with me, guys. I appreciate all your input. I'll see you tomorrow with Michael and Ben. Okay. Take care. Have a good day.